So Sri Lanka's got this new Anti-Terrorism Bill, and they're pitching it as this big step forward for human rights. But when you actually dig past the promises and get into the fine print, you find a law that could seriously threaten the privacy and free speech of every single citizen. Let's break down what's really going on here.
And that really gets to the heart of the problem, something a researcher, Dr. Sanjana Hatua, pointed out. You've got the government promising this whole new approach, but the bill's core architecture seems to be just recycling the most controversial parts of the very law it's supposed to get rid of.
Okay, so the official name is the Protection of the State from Terrorism Act. It's supposed to replace the old, and let's be honest, pretty controversial Prevention of Terrorism Act, or PTA. Right now, the draft is actually open for public comment, which gives us this really important chance to see what's actually at stake here.
All right, so the first huge red flag, it pops up right in the definitions. It's all about how the bill cooks up this super broad, super vague category of things you're just not allowed to share. They call it confidential information.
So if you look at the actual text from Section 78, it's incredibly broad. It talks about the movements of a specified person. And get this, the bill never even tells you what a specified person is. And then it throws in this kicker: any password or encryption detail. That vagueness, that's not an accident, and it's a massive problem.
So what does all that legal speak actually mean for you and me? What translates into some pretty scary restrictions on stuff we do every day. I mean, think about it. You post a photo of a military checkpoint. You tweet that you spotted an intelligence agent at a protest. Or you just send a quick WhatsApp to your neighbors to warn them about a police search. Any of these things, these simple little acts, could suddenly make you a criminal under this new bill.
But it doesn't stop there. Oh no, the bill actually goes even further. It's not just about punishing you for sharing information, it creates this whole new, really troubling duty that could basically force you to become an informant. And this puts professionals in a classic no-win situation. Just imagine for a second, you're a journalist with a confidential source, or you're a lawyer and your client tells you something in confidence. Well, Section 15 of this bill says you have to report any whiff of a potential offense straight to the police. And if you don't, you could be looking at up to 7 years in prison. It literally pits your professional ethics against the law.
What this does, really, is it turns regular people into informants for the state. And we're not just talking about journalists and lawyers here. Think about a doctor who hears a confession, or even the person who moderates a diaspora Facebook group and sees a post that's a little bit sketchy. Suddenly, they're on the hook. The message is crystal clear. Report on your own community, or you could be the one going to jail.
And you might be thinking, well, what about existing protections, like journalist source privilege? Nope. Think again, because Section 74 says, flat out, that this new act overrides every other law. So the burden of proof is on you to somehow convince a court that your professional ethics count as a reasonable excuse. And let's be real, that's an incredibly tough, maybe even impossible argument to win.
Okay, so all of this control over information, it's backed up by a serious expansion of military power, and this bill shoves that power right into our digital lives. Section 19 lays it out plain and simple. The military gets the exact same search and seizure powers as the police. And yeah, that means your phone, your laptop, your hard drives, your entire digital life, basically.
And this whole thing, it really hangs on one single critical number: 24. 24, as in 24 hours. That's how long the military can hold you, a civilian, before they have to hand you over to the police. That's a whole day with zero civilian or judicial oversight. A day where pretty much anything can happen off the books.
And this timeline here, it shows you exactly why that 24-hour gap is so incredibly dangerous. So step 1, a soldier arrests you and takes your phone. Then comes that 24-hour gap. During that time, they can pressure you, coerce you to give up your passwords and get into all your data. And look, given the well-documented history of torture and military detention, that threat of coercion is very, very real. So by the time you're finally handed over to the police, your entire digital life may have already been ripped open, long before any judge even knows your name.
And that brings us to maybe the biggest, most far-reaching tech threat in this entire bill: a direct attack on the private, secure communication that pretty much all of us rely on every single day.
Okay, so first, just a super quick refresher on what we're talking about. End-to-end encryption, you'll see it called E2E. That's the tech that keeps your messages on apps like Signal and WhatsApp private. The whole point is that it's designed so only you and the person you're talking to can read the messages. Not even the company that makes the app can decrypt them.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Because this slide shows a fundamental conflict. It's either a total misunderstanding of the technology or maybe a deliberate misrepresentation in the law. On the left, you've got how E2E actually works. The service provider, like WhatsApp, has no key. But on the right, you see what the bill wants to do in Section 55. It wants to give a magistrate the power to order a provider to unencrypt a service. It just assumes there's some kind of master key that they can use to unlock everything, when by design, one just doesn't exist.
And believe me, the attack on our digital privacy doesn't end there. You've got other sections that cast this huge net. Section 10, for example, could make you a criminal just for sharing a link to something they decide is a terrorist publication. Then there's Section 53, which gives police massive access to data held by your internet provider. And hey, this isn't just theory. We're already seeing this happen in the real world, with new services like Starlink reportedly being told they have to build in ways for the government to intercept data just to be allowed to operate.
So when you put all this together, you really have to ask, is this bill a fresh start, or is it just the same old playbook with a new cover?
So what's the bottom line here? Well, they promised a human rights upgrade, but what we're really seeing is a chilling effect on speech and journalism. They promised a modernized security law, but the reality is more military power and a huge threat to every citizen's digital privacy. So in the end, it doesn't really replace the old PTA at all. It just brings back its worst features in a shiny new package. Now, to be fair, the bill does throw in a couple of what look like safeguards, like an exception for journalism that's done in good faith. But here's the catch. The term good faith is never actually defined anywhere, and that means its interpretation is totally up to the political mood of whoever's in charge, which makes it a pretty flimsy shield, if you ask me.
And listen, this next point is absolutely crucial, especially if you're watching this from outside Sri Lanka. Section 2C makes it crystal clear that this law applies to all Sri Lankan citizens, and that includes dual citizens, no matter where you are in the world. So sharing information about what's happening back home from London or from New York, yeah, that could now put you at risk. So I want to leave you with this question. What this bill is really doing is trying to turn the very tools we use to speak our minds, social media, our encrypted apps, the internet itself, into tools of state control. So ask yourself this. If the very tools you use to speak freely and privately could be turned against you, what would you stop saying? What would you suddenly be too afraid to share? That right there, that's the core question this law forces every single one of us to answer.